Picture this: you're worth $12 billion, pregnant with your first child, and married to the love of your life. Tonight, you're celebrating the biggest IPO in tech history. Tomorrow, someone you trust completely will try to murder you in a burning limousine. Victoria Sterling thought she had everything: a tech empire, a devoted husband, and a baby on the way. But behind the champagne toasts and congratulations, a deadly conspiracy was already in motion. Her own husband was planning her assassination, aided by a social media influencer who taught manifestation to 100,000 followers while plotting murder. What started as corporate greed became a web of betrayal that would cost Victoria her unborn child, her marriage, and nearly her life. But here's what her enemies didn't count on: Victoria Sterling doesn't stay down. And when a desperate father becomes an unlikely ally, their fight for survival will expose a criminal network targeting successful women across America. This is the story of how a burning car became the catalyst for the largest takedown of organized crime against women in history. Buckle up, because this ride is about to get deadly. The champagne bubbles caught the light like tiny diamonds as Victoria Sterling raised her glass to the crowd of Silicon Valley's elite. The penthouse ballroom of the Meridian Tower sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the satisfied murmurs of investors who had just watched Sterling Industries go public at $47 per share. To innovation, to courage, and to the future we're building together, Victoria declared, her voice carrying across the room with the authority that had made her the youngest female tech billionaire in America. The applause was thunderous. Camera flashes sparked like fireworks as reporters captured the moment. Victoria's hand instinctively moved to her still flat stomach, where a 12-week secret grew beneath her emerald silk dress. Tonight wasn't just about the IPO. Tonight was about everything she had dreamed of having: a successful company, a loving husband, and soon, a family. Marcus Sterling stood beside her, his arm wrapped possessively around her waist. At 42, he possessed the kind of effortless charm that opened doors and closed deals. His venture capital firm had been instrumental in Sterling Industries' early funding rounds, and their marriage 2 years ago had been dubbed the power couple merger of the decade by Forbes. Incredible speech, darling, Marcus whispered in her ear, his breath warm against her neck. You're absolutely glowing tonight. Victoria smiled, leaning into his embrace. If only he knew why she was truly glowing. The pregnancy test from 3 days ago sat hidden in her desk drawer at home, waiting for the perfect moment to share the news. Perhaps tonight, after the guests left and they were alone with their triumph, Senator Patricia Wells, Victoria's longtime mentor and Sterling Industries board member, approached with her characteristic purposeful stride. At 55, the senator had weathered 3 decades in Washington and emerged as one of the most respected voices on technology policy. Victoria, magnificent evening, Senator Wells said, clasping both of Victoria's hands. The market response has been extraordinary. Sterling Industries is now valued at $12 billion. You should be very proud. Thank you, Patricia. None of this would have been possible without your guidance and support on the regulatory front. Senator Wells smiled, but Victoria noticed something guarded in her expression. Could I have a word with you privately? Just for a moment? Victoria glanced at Marcus, who was already deep in conversation with a group of hedge fund managers. Of course. They stepped onto the balcony overlooking the glittering San Francisco Bay. The October evening was crisp, and Victoria pulled her wrap tighter around her shoulders. Victoria, I want you to be careful, Senator Wells began, her voice low and serious. There are rumors circulating about hostile takeover attempts. Some very powerful people weren't happy about being excluded from your IPO. We expected pushback from competitors. Sterling Industries has disrupted their market share considerably. This goes beyond normal business competition. I'm hearing whispers about manufactured scandals. attempts to destabilize your leadership. Promise me you'll watch your back, especially with those closest to you. Before Victoria could respond, Marcus appeared at the balcony door. Ladies, you're missing the best part of the evening. The tech journalists want quotes for tomorrow's coverage. Senator Wells smiled politely. Of course. We were just discussing the remarkable success of tonight's launch. She squeezed Victoria's hand meaningfully. Remember what I said. As they returned to the party, Victoria felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. She pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on the joy of the moment and the secret life growing within her. Across the city, in a modest apartment complex far from the glittering towers of wealth, Jake Morrison sat on his couch, watching the news coverage of Sterling Industries' IPO celebration. The reporter's voice filled his small living room as images of Victoria Sterling's triumph played across the screen. Sterling Industries shares closed their first day of trading at $62, representing a 32% gain and making CEO Victoria Sterling one of the wealthiest self-made women in America. Jake reached for the remote to change the channel, but paused when he saw Victoria's face on the screen. 6 months ago, he had worked as a senior security consultant for Sterling Industries. 6 months ago, Victoria Sterling had called him into her office and terminated his employment due to restructuring and cost-cutting measures. The irony wasn't lost on him that on the same day she became worth $12 billion. He was struggling to pay his son's medical bills. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Tommy's fever is back up. The doctors want to do more tests. We need to talk about the surgery soon. Jake closed his eyes, running his hands through his hair. 8-year-old Tommy had been living with his grandmother since Jake's wife died in a car accident 2 years ago. The boy needed heart surgery that would cost $50,000. Jake's military disability payments and odd security jobs barely covered basic expenses, let alone major medical procedures. Another text arrived, this one from an unknown number. Mr. Butt Morrison, my name is Marcus Sterling. I believe we have mutual interests regarding my wife's company. Would you be available to meet tomorrow? I have a proposition that could solve your financial difficulties. Very confidential. Very lucrative. Jake stared at the message for a long moment. Marcus Sterling, Victoria's husband, reaching out to a fired employee seemed suspicious at best. But $50,000 was $50,000, and Tommy needed that surgery. He typed back, I'm listening. Where and when? The response came immediately. Pier 49, Warehouse District, 2 p.m. Come alone. This conversation never happened. Jake set his phone aside and looked back at the television, where Victoria Sterling was still celebrating her triumph, surrounded by wealth and power and the illusion of security. He had no idea that the message he had just answered would set in motion a chain of events that would destroy both their worlds. Meanwhile, in her downtown loft, 29-year-old Cassandra Vale was crafting her Instagram story with the same precision other people used for business presentations. Her ring light cast a perfect glow on her face as she positioned herself in front of her vision board, which featured magazine cutouts of luxury cars, designer handbags, and newspaper clippings about successful women entrepreneurs. Good evening, success warriors, she said to her phone camera, her voice dripping with practiced enthusiasm. Tonight, while most people are watching Netflix and eating takeout, the real players are making moves. Victoria Sterling just proved that, with enough manifestation and strategic action, any woman can build an empire. She paused the recording and glanced at her laptop screen, where a private message thread with Marcus Sterling showed their latest exchange. For 3 months, they had been planning something much bigger than her followers could ever imagine. Marcus had found her through her financial advice videos, where she taught her 100,000 followers about leveraging wealth consciousness and attracting abundance through bold action. What he had proposed was the boldest action she had ever considered. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Victoria Sterling would have a tragic accident, leaving Marcus as the grieving widower who would inherit controlling interest in Sterling Industries. Cassandra would emerge as his new love interest, the supportive woman who helped him heal and move forward. Together, they would build a business empire that dwarfed Victoria's individual success. The pregnancy was an unexpected complication, but Marcus assured her it would make the accident even more tragic and sympathetic. A grieving widower who had lost both wife and child would be above suspicion. Cassandra resumed recording her video. Remember, beautiful souls, success isn't just about what you build. Sometimes it's about recognizing opportunities that others miss. Sometimes the universe removes obstacles to clear your path to greatness. Trust the process, and trust that you deserve everything you desire. She ended the recording and posted it with hashtags like Success Mindset, Manifestation Monday, and Abundance Attraction. Within minutes, comments and likes began pouring in from followers who had no idea they were watching someone plan a murder. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Everything is in motion. The consultation with Morrison is tomorrow. By next week, our new life begins. Cassandra smiled at her reflection in the ring light's glow. She had manifested many things through focused intention and strategic action, but she had never manifested $12 billion before. This would be her greatest success story yet. Back at the celebration, Victoria felt the weight of the evening settling into her bones. The guests were beginning to leave, their congratulations and business cards creating a pile on the reception table. She found Marcus by the bar, finishing what appeared to be his fourth whiskey of the evening. "Ready to go home?" she asked, slipping her hand into his. "Absolutely. Tonight calls for a private celebration." His smile was warm, but she noticed something distant in his eyes, as if part of his mind was somewhere else entirely. As their car pulled away from the Meridian Tower, Victoria watched the city lights blur past her window. Tomorrow, she would tell Marcus about the pregnancy. Tomorrow, they would start planning for the family she had always dreamed of having. Tonight, she was simply a woman who had achieved everything she had ever wanted. She had no way of knowing that tomorrow, Marcus would meet with Jake Morrison in a warehouse and set in motion the plan that would destroy her life. She had no way of knowing that the man she loved was already planning her death, or that the baby she carried would become part of a twisted game of greed and betrayal. For now, Victoria Sterling was simply happy, successful, and in love. By next week, she would be none of those things. The Pier District smelled of salt water and diesel fuel, with fog rolling in from the bay to wrap around the weathered buildings like a gray shroud. Jake Morrison arrived at warehouse 49 15 minutes early, a habit drilled into him by years of military service and security work. The building was abandoned, its windows boarded up, and its loading docks empty except for rusted chains and broken concrete. Marcus Sterling's black Tesla pulled up precisely at 2 p.m. He emerged wearing a casual navy jacket and jeans, trying to project approachability. But Jake recognized the expensive watch and Italian leather shoes that marked him as someone who had never worried about money. "Mr. Morrison, thank you for coming," Marcus said, extending his hand. His grip was firm, but not calloused. These were hands that signed contracts, not hands that did real work. "Mr. Sterling, your message mentioned mutual interest regarding your wife's company." Marcus glanced around the empty pier before gesturing toward the warehouse entrance. "Shall we speak inside? What I have to propose requires complete privacy." The warehouse interior was dim and echoing, filled with dust particles dancing in shafts of light from high windows. Marcus led Jake to a corner where someone had arranged 2 folding chairs, suggesting this meeting had been planned in advance. "I'll be direct," Marcus began, settling into his chair. "Sterling Industries is facing challenges that the public doesn't know about. Hostile takeover attempts, boardroom politics, the usual corporate warfare. My wife is brilliant, but she's also stubborn and idealistic. Sometimes that combination puts her in danger. Jake remained standing, his military training keeping him alert for potential threats. What does this have to do with me? Your wife fired me 6 months ago? Exactly. You understand better than anyone how Victoria can be. Decisive to the point of ruthlessness when she feels betrayed or threatened. But here's what you might not know about the circumstances of your termination. Marcus pulled out a manila folder and handed it to Jake. Inside were photocopied documents, financial records, and what appeared to be internal memos. Victoria didn't fire you because of cost cutting. Marcus continued. She fired you because someone convinced her you were a security risk. Someone planted evidence suggesting you were planning industrial espionage, selling Sterling Industries' secrets to competitors. Jake's jaw tightened as he scanned the documents. They were sophisticated forgeries, but forgeries nonetheless. Bank deposits that never happened, meeting records with people he had never met, communications he had never sent. This is fabricated, Jake said flatly. Of course it is, but Victoria believed it. She fired you without a hearing, without giving you a chance to defend yourself. She destroyed your reputation and your livelihood based on lies. The manipulation was subtle, but effective. Marcus was feeding Jake's anger and resentment, giving him a target for the frustration that had been building for months. Why are you showing me this? Marcus leaned forward, his expression earnest and concerned. Because I need someone I can trust to help me protect Victoria from the people who are really trying to hurt her. Someone with your skills and background. Someone who has reason to see justice done. What exactly are you proposing? Victoria drives the same route every Tuesday evening, from the office to her charity board meeting downtown. A predictable pattern that makes her vulnerable. I want to hire you to stage a controlled incident that will demonstrate how easily she could be targeted by real enemies. Jake's instincts immediately rebelled against the proposal. You want me to attack your wife? Not attack. Demonstrate vulnerability. A blocked road. A disabled vehicle. Something that shows how exposed she is during that weekly drive. When you rescue her from the situation you've created, it will prove two things: that she needs better security, and that you're not the enemy she believed you were. Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. $50,000. Enough to cover your son's surgery with money left over. All for one evening's work that will actually make Victoria safer in the long run. The amount hit Jake like a physical blow. $50,000 was exactly what Tommy needed. Exactly what had been keeping Jake awake at night for months. This sounds like elaborate revenge, not security consultation. I understand your skepticism, but consider the alternative. Victoria continues driving that route unprotected, and eventually someone with genuinely malicious intentions takes advantage, at least this way. She learns about the vulnerability from someone who won't actually hurt her. Marcus stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the fog-shrouded bay. I love my wife, Mr. Morrison. But love sometimes means forcing people to confront truths they don't want to see. Victoria needs to understand that the world isn't as safe as she believes. Especially now. Especially now. She's pregnant. 12 weeks. She hasn't announced it yet. Hasn't even told me she knows I'm aware. But a pregnant woman worth $12 billion is an irresistible target for kidnapping, extortion, or worse. The pregnancy revelation added another layer of complexity to the situation. A pregnant woman was more vulnerable, more precious, and any threat against her carried additional moral weight. What exactly would this demonstration involve? Marcus turned back to Jake, and for a moment, his mask of concern slipped to reveal something colder underneath. Her limousine has a predictable route and schedule. A simple mechanical failure at the right moment, in the right location. Where you happen to be nearby to assist, you help her to safety, prove your loyalty, and she realizes she misjudged you. Mechanical failure. Nothing dangerous. A disabled engine? Perhaps some smoke for dramatic effect? You have the technical background to make it look authentic. Jake's military experience included demolitions and vehicle mechanics, skills that would make such a staged incident possible. But everything about the proposal felt wrong, despite the financial desperation driving him to consider it. I need time to think about this. Marcus nodded and handed him a business card with only a phone number written on it. Call me within 24 hours. The opportunity window is narrow, and timing is critical. As they walked back toward their vehicles, Marcus added one final detail. Mr. Morrison, I should mention that Victoria's charity board meeting next Tuesday has been moved to Thursday. She doesn't know yet, but she'll receive the notification on Monday. I wanted you to have advance notice so you can plan accordingly. The casual way Marcus revealed inside information about his wife's schedule sent another warning signal through Jake's mind. But $50,000 was $50,000, and Tommy needed that surgery. One question, Jake said as they reached their cars. Why me? You could hire any security firm in the city. Marcus smiled, and this time, the expression was genuinely warm. Because you're the only person who has as much reason as I do to want Victoria to finally see the truth about who she can trust. After Marcus drove away, Jake remained in the warehouse parking lot for another 20 minutes, staring at the envelope of money. The bills were real, the amount was exact, and his son's medical needs were urgent. But every instinct he had developed through years of military service and security work was screaming that something was fundamentally wrong with Marcus Sterling's proposal. The man claimed to love his wife, but he spoke about her with the detached calculation of someone planning a business acquisition. Jake's phone buzzed with another text from his mother. Tommy's asking for you. The doctors want to schedule the surgery for next month if we can arrange payment. $50,000. His son's life hanging in the balance. A wealthy man offering a solution that seemed too convenient and too dangerous to be genuine. Jake started his truck and drove home through the gathering fog, the envelope of money burning like a coal in his jacket pocket. By the time he reached his apartment, he had made his decision, though he wasn't entirely sure it was the right one. That evening, Marcus returned to his penthouse to find Victoria in her home office, surrounded by financial reports and strategic planning documents. She looked up as he entered, her face glowing with the satisfaction of a successful day. How was your meeting with the venture capital group? She asked. Productive. We discussed some interesting possibilities for international expansion. The lie came easily, practiced and smooth. Marcus moved behind her chair and began massaging her shoulders. You're working too hard, especially after such a long day yesterday. Why don't we order dinner and celebrate privately? Victoria leaned back against him, allowing herself to relax for the first time in hours. That sounds perfect. Actually, there's something I've been wanting to tell you. Marcus's hands stilled on her shoulders. What's that? Victoria turned in her chair to face him, her eyes bright with excitement and nervousness. We're going to have a baby. I'm 12 weeks pregnant. The expression of joy and surprise that crossed Marcus's face was a masterpiece of deception. He swept Victoria into his arms, spinning her around the office as she laughed with delight. That's incredible news, he said, setting her down gently. The most beautiful news I've ever heard. But as he held her close, Marcus was already calculating how the pregnancy announcement would affect his timeline. The public sympathy for a grieving widower who had lost both wife and child would be immense. The board of directors would never question his right to inherit controlling interest in Sterling Industries. We'll need to be extra careful about your security now, he murmured into her hair. A pregnant CEO worth $12 billion will attract all kinds of unwanted attention. Victoria pulled back to look at him, touched by his immediate concern for her safety. You're probably right. Maybe we should look into hiring additional protection. Actually, I have some ideas about that. Let me handle the security arrangements while you focus on the company and taking care of yourself. As they embraced again, Victoria felt overwhelmed with gratitude for her husband's love and support. She had no way of knowing that Marcus was already planning the exact method of her death, or that the man he had hired to kill her was sitting in an apartment across the city, wrestling with the decision that would seal both their fates. In 12 hours, Jake Morrison would make the phone call that would set the plan in motion. In 4 days, Victoria Sterling would climb into her limousine for the last time, unaware that her husband had arranged for it to become her coffin. The golden cage was closing around her, and she couldn't see the bars. Jake Morrison didn't sleep that night. He sat at his kitchen table until dawn, the envelope of money spread open before him, $50,000 in crisp hundreds staring back at him like an accusation. Beside the cash lay a photo of Tommy from last Christmas. The boy's smile wide, despite the pale complexion and the medical bracelet on his thin wrist. At 6 a.m., his phone rang. His mother's voice was tight with worry. "Jake, you need to get to the hospital. Tommy had another episode during the night. The doctors say we can't wait much longer for the surgery." 40 minutes later, Jake stood beside his son's hospital bed in the pediatric intensive care unit. Tommy was awake, but weak, his small hand dwarfed by the monitors and IVs surrounding him. "Hey, Dad," Tommy whispered. "Mom says I might get my new heart valve soon." "That's right, buddy. Very soon." Dr. Barry, Sarah Mitchell, Tommy's cardiologist, gestured for Jake to step outside the room. In the hallway, she was direct and compassionate in the way doctors learned when delivering difficult news repeatedly. "Mr. Morrison, Tommy's condition is deteriorating faster than we anticipated. We need to perform the surgery within the next 2 weeks, or we risk permanent damage to his heart muscle. And the cost, $50,000 for the procedure, plus additional expenses for post-operative care. I understand your insurance situation is complicated." Jake nodded numbly. His military disability coverage had gaps, and Tommy's pre-existing condition created additional complications with civilian insurance policies. "Doctor, if we can arrange payment, how quickly could you schedule the surgery?" "Within 48 hours. We have an opening Thursday morning, if you can confirm payment by Tuesday." Thursday morning. The same day Marcus Sterling wanted him to stage Victoria's accident. The timing felt like cosmic mockery. Jake returned to Tommy's bedside and spent the morning reading to his son, trying to ignore the weight of the decision pressing down on him. At noon, he kissed Tommy's forehead and promised to return that evening, in the hospital parking lot. Jake pulled out Marcus Sterling's card and stared at the phone number. Every rational instinct told him to walk away, to find another solution, to avoid getting involved in what felt increasingly like a trap. But rational instincts didn't pay for life-saving surgery. He dialed the number. "Mr. Morrison," Marcus answered on the first ring. "I was hoping to hear from you." "I'll do it, but I need guarantees. The full payment in advance, and assurance that Mrs. Sterling won't be seriously harmed." "Of course. The money will be in your account within the hour. As for Victoria's safety, that's exactly why I'm hiring you instead of someone with less professional ethics." "What are the specific details?" Marcus's voice became businesslike and precise. Thursday evening, 6:30 p.m., Victoria will be leaving her office for the charity board meeting downtown. Her usual route takes her through the warehouse district where we met yesterday, the perfect location for a mechanical failure that requires outside assistance. What kind of mechanical failure? Something dramatic enough to be convincing, but controlled enough to ensure her safety. Perhaps an electrical problem that creates smoke and disables the engine. You have the technical expertise to make it look authentic. Jake closed his eyes, trying to push away the growing certainty that he was making a terrible mistake. "And after I rescue her, you'll have proven your loyalty and competence. Victoria will realize she was wrong about you, and you'll be positioned for reinstatement with Sterling Industries. A win for everyone involved. The conversation ended with specific technical details about Victoria's limousine, information that Marcus shouldn't have possessed unless he had been planning this for some time. Jake drove home with $50,000 in his bank account and the sick feeling that he had just signed someone's death warrant. That afternoon, across the city, Victoria Sterling was in her corner office reviewing quarterly projections when her assistant knocked on the door. Mrs. Sterling, there's been a schedule change for Thursday's charity board meeting. It's been moved to 7 p.m. to accommodate Senator Wells's speaking engagement. Victoria frowned. That's unusual. Who authorized the change? The notification came from the board chair's office this morning. Apparently, Senator Wells had a conflict with her original time slot. After her assistant left, Victoria tried calling Senator Wells directly, but reached voicemail. Something felt off about the sudden schedule change, but charity board politics were often complicated by competing agendas and oversized egos. She made a note to leave the office at 6:15 instead of 5:30, giving herself extra time to navigate evening traffic. The small change in her routine would put her in the warehouse district at exactly the time Marcus had specified to Jake Morrison. Meanwhile, in her downtown loft, Cassandra Vale was documenting her daily routine for her social media followers. The irony of posting about manifestation and abundance while planning a murder wasn't lost on her, but it provided perfect cover for her activities. Tuesday transformation tip. Beautiful souls, she said to her ring light setup. Sometimes the universe presents us with challenges that seem insurmountable. But here's the secret. Every obstacle is actually an opportunity in disguise. The key is having the courage to take bold action when the moment presents itself. She paused the recording to check her messages. Marcus had confirmed that Jake Morrison had agreed to the plan. Everything was moving forward according to schedule. Remember, she continued, success isn't about playing it safe. It's about recognizing when the universe is aligning opportunities for your highest good. Trust your intuition. Trust the process. And trust that you deserve everything you desire. The comments on her post were predictably supportive, full of fire emojis and affirmations from followers who had no idea they were receiving life advice from someone planning to become an accessory to murder. Tuesday evening. Jake Morrison sat in his truck outside Sterling Industries headquarters, watching Victoria's employees leave for the day. At 6:20, Victoria emerged from the building and climbed into her black limousine. She looked tired, but satisfied. The expression of someone who had accomplished meaningful work. Jake followed at a distance as the limousine wound through downtown traffic toward the warehouse district. His military training had kicked in automatically, noting escape routes, potential witnesses, and the positioning of security cameras. The area Marcus had chosen was isolated but not completely deserted, perfect for a staged rescue that would have enough witnesses to be credible. At 6:45, Jake pulled into an alley near the route Victoria's limousine would take in approximately 10 minutes. From his truck's toolbox, he retrieved the device he had spent the previous evening constructing a sophisticated, remote-controlled electromagnetic pulse generator that could disable a vehicle's electrical system and create dramatic but harmless smoke effects. The device was elegant in its simplicity. Using technology he had learned during his military service, but adapted for what Marcus had described as a harmless demonstration. The EMP would shut down the limousine's engine and electronics, while triggering smoke canisters Jake had placed along the route earlier that day. At 6:52, Victoria's limousine approached the predetermined location. Jake activated the device. The effect was immediate and more dramatic than he had anticipated. The limousine's lights died instantly, and the vehicle coasted to a stop as thick gray smoke began pouring from beneath the hood. But something was wrong. Instead of the controlled electrical failure Jake had engineered, real flames began licking at the edges of the smoke. Jake's blood went cold as he realized what had happened. Someone had modified his device, turning a harmless demonstration into something deadly. The electromagnetic pulse had triggered not just his smoke canisters, but additional incendiary devices that had been hidden throughout the limousine. Marcus Sterling hadn't hired him to stage a rescue. He had hired him to commit murder, using Jake's own technical expertise as the weapon. Victoria was trapped inside a burning vehicle, and Jake Morrison was the only person who could save her from the death he had inadvertently caused. Without hesitation, Jake abandoned his truck and ran toward the burning limousine, his combat training overriding every other consideration. Behind him, his phone buzzed with a text message from Marcus Sterling. Phase 1 complete. Proceed to Phase 2. But Jake Morrison wasn't proceeding to anything except trying to save the life of the woman he had been tricked into trying to kill. The envelope of money in his apartment suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the human being burning alive 50 feet away from him. As he reached the limousine, Jake could see Victoria inside, pounding on the windows and screaming for help. The door handles were hot enough to burn skin, but Jake ignored the pain as he grabbed a tire iron from his truck and began smashing the bulletproof glass. The warehouse district echoed with the sound of breaking glass and Victoria's terrified screams, while across the city, Marcus Sterling poured himself a whiskey and prepared to play the role of grieving widower. But his plan had already begun to unravel, because he had underestimated the conscience of the man he had hired to be his weapon. Jake Morrison had been many things in his life: a soldier, a father, a man pushed to desperation by circumstances beyond his control. But he had never been a murderer, and he wasn't going to become one now, regardless of the cost. As the glass finally shattered and Jake reached through the flames to pull Victoria to safety, both their lives changed forever. The burning limousine would be just the beginning of a war neither of them had seen coming. The explosion came without warning, a deafening roar that shook the warehouse district and sent a pillar of orange flame 50 feet into the evening sky. Jake Morrison threw himself over Victoria Sterling as debris rained down around them, his body shielding her from the twisted metal and burning glass that had been her limousine seconds before. When the echo faded, they lay on the cracked asphalt 20 yards from the wreckage, both alive but changed forever. Victoria's emerald dress was torn and stained with soot, her face streaked with tears and smoke residue. Jake's hands were burned from breaking the bulletproof glass, his jacket singed from reaching through the flames. "My baby?" Victoria whispered, her hands pressed to her stomach. "Is my baby okay?" Jake helped her sit up, scanning her for obvious injuries. "We need to get you to a hospital. Right now." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as emergency responders raced toward the scene. Victoria looked back at the burning wreckage of her limousine, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. "The car just died," she said, her voice hollow with shock. The lights went out, the engine stopped, and then there was smoke everywhere. "If you hadn't been here, don't think about that," Jake said gently. "Just focus on breathing. Help is coming." But as the first fire trucks arrived, Jake's mind was racing through the implications of what he now understood. Marcus Sterling had manipulated him into becoming the perfect scapegoat. Jake's presence at the scene, his technical background, his history of resentment toward Victoria, all of it would make him the obvious suspect when investigators started looking for answers. The paramedics arrived within minutes, immediately focusing on Victoria's condition. As they loaded her onto a stretcher, she grabbed Jake's burned hand. "Thank you," she said, her eyes bright with gratitude and fear. "You saved my life." Jake nodded, but inside he felt sick with the knowledge that he had also nearly caused her death. As the ambulance pulled away, Detective Ray Harrison approached Jake with the weary expression of someone who had seen too many crime scenes. "You're Jake Morrison?" Detective Harrison consulted his notepad. "The witness who pulled Mrs. Mott Sterling from the vehicle." "That's right. We'll need a detailed statement. This kind of catastrophic failure in a luxury vehicle is highly unusual. We're treating this as a potential attempt on Mrs. Sterling's life. Jake's heart pounded as he realized how perfectly Marcus's plan had worked. Even saving Victoria's life had made Jake look more suspicious, not less. The hero who arrives at exactly the right moment is always the first suspect in a staged crime. At San Francisco General Hospital, Dr. Sarah Mitchell was finishing her shift when Victoria Sterling was rushed into the emergency department. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was treating both the woman and the father of the boy whose surgery was scheduled for the following morning. Mrs. Sterling has smoke inhalation and minor burns. The attending physician briefed Dr. Mitchell, but we're most concerned about potential complications from the trauma. She's 12 weeks pregnant. Dr. Mitchell immediately took charge of Victoria's care, knowing that the next few hours would be critical for both mother and child. In the examination room, Victoria was conscious, but clearly in shock. Doctor, is my baby going to be okay? Victoria asked, her voice breaking. Dr. Mitchell performed an ultrasound with gentle efficiency, her trained eyes reading the monitor that would determine whether the Sterling family tragedy would be complete or limited. The silence stretched for 30 seconds that felt like hours. Finally, Dr. Mitchell set down the ultrasound wand and turned to face Victoria with the expression that doctors reserve for delivering the worst possible news. I'm so sorry. Mrs. Sterling, there's no heartbeat. You've lost the baby. The sound that came from Victoria was barely human, a keening wail of grief that seemed to tear something fundamental inside her chest. Dr. Mitchell held her as she sobbed, offering the only comfort possible in the face of such devastating loss. The trauma from the accident, the smoke inhalation, the stress. Dr. Mitchell explained gently. Sometimes these factors combine in ways that make it impossible for a pregnancy to continue. This is not your fault. But Victoria wasn't listening to medical explanations. She was drowning in the realization that her dreams of family, of completing the life she had worked so hard to build, had died in the flames along with her unborn child. 40 minutes later, Marcus Sterling arrived at the hospital with an Academy Award-worthy performance of shock and concern. He rushed into Victoria's room carrying flowers and wearing the expression of a devoted husband whose world had just been shattered. "Oh, thank God you're alive," he said, embracing Victoria as she lay in the hospital bed. "When I got the call about the explosion, I thought I'd lost everything." "We did lose everything," Victoria said, her voice flat with grief. "We lost our baby." Marcus's face crumpled with what appeared to be genuine anguish. "No." "Oh." "Victoria, no." He held her as she cried, whispering words of comfort and love, playing the role of grieving father with devastating effectiveness. But behind his mask of sorrow, Marcus was calculating the advantages of Victoria's loss. A dead child couldn't inherit Sterling Industries. A grieving widow might be more easily manipulated into signing over control of her company. "The doctors say you're going to be fine physically," Marcus said. "That's what matters most. We can try again when you're ready." Victoria pulled away from him, something cold settling in her eyes. "Marcus, this wasn't an accident. Someone tried to kill me tonight." "That's impossible. Who would want to hurt you?" "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Detective Harrison entered with Jake Morrison, who looked haggard and exhausted. "Mrs. Sterling," Detective Harrison said, "I need to ask you some questions about tonight's incident." Mr. Morrison has provided his statement, but we need your perspective on what happened. Victoria looked at Jake with renewed gratitude. "This man saved my life. If he hadn't been there..." "Actually," Detective Harrison said carefully, "that's one of the things we need to discuss. Mr. Morrison, you were terminated from Sterling Industries 6 months ago. What were you doing in that specific location at that exact time? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Jake met Victoria's eyes and saw the moment when doubt began to creep into her expression. I was driving through the area, Jake said. Wrong place at the right time. The warehouse district isn't on any logical route from your apartment to anywhere else you might need to go. Detective Harrison continued. And you just happen to have tire iron and emergency equipment in your truck. I'm former military. I keep emergency supplies in my vehicle. But Victoria was studying Jake's face with the analytical mind that had built a billion-dollar empire. The coincidences were stacking up in ways that didn't make sense. Jake, she said quietly, tell me the truth. Why were you really there? Jake looked at Victoria, then at Marcus, then back at Victoria. He could tell the truth and admit his role in the plot, but that would make him an accessory to attempted murder. He could continue lying and hope the evidence didn't point back to him, or he could try to find a middle ground that might protect them both. Someone hired me to stage a demonstration, Jake said finally. A fake security incident that would prove you needed better protection. I thought it was a harmless way to get back into your good graces and earn some money for my son's medical bills. Who hired you? Detective Harrison asked. Jake looked directly at Marcus. I don't know. The contact was anonymous. Payment in cash. They said they were concerned about Mrs. Sterling's safety and wanted to prove a point about her vulnerability. Marcus's expression didn't change, but Victoria saw something flicker in his eyes. For the first time since waking up in the hospital, she felt afraid of something other than her own grief. Jake, she said, what exactly were you supposed to do? Disable your car with an electromagnetic pulse, create some harmless smoke, then help you to safety. It was supposed to be theater, not attempted murder. Someone modified the plan without telling me. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Someone had used Jake Morrison as an unwitting weapon, turning his attempt at staged heroics into a real assassination attempt. Detective, Victoria said, I want full protection until you find out who did this, and I want to know everything about how this plan was organized. As Detective Harrison and Jake left the room, Marcus moved closer to Victoria's bed. Darling, you need to rest. Let the police handle this investigation. No, Victoria said firmly. Someone tried to kill me and murdered my child. I'm going to destroy them. The ice in her voice was colder than Marcus had ever heard, and for the first time since beginning his plan, he felt a flicker of genuine fear. Victoria Sterling had always been formidable in business, but grief and rage had transformed her into something far more dangerous. As Marcus kissed her forehead and promised to stay by her side through the investigation. Victoria Sterling was already planning her own investigation. She had built an empire by trusting no one completely and verifying everything independently. She was about to apply those same principles to discovering who had tried to murder her, starting with the man who claimed to love her most. The golden cage had been shattered by fire and blood, but Victoria Sterling was still alive, and now she was angry. 3 days after the explosion, Victoria Sterling sat in her home office surrounded by financial documents, security reports, and a growing mountain of evidence that someone close to her had orchestrated the attack. Dr. Sarah Mitchell had cleared her for light activity, but Victoria's definition of light involved 16-hour days investigating the attempt on her life. The official police investigation was moving slowly, hampered by the complexity of the evidence and the high-profile nature of the case. But Victoria had resources the police didn't have, and she was using every one of them. Mrs. Sterling, her private investigator called from the doorway. I have the financial records you requested. David Chen had worked security for 3 Fortune 500 companies before starting his own investigation firm. Victoria had hired him the morning after leaving the hospital, with instructions to follow every lead, regardless of how painful the truth might be. What did you find? Your husband has been making some interesting financial moves over the past 6 months, Chen said, spreading documents across Victoria's desk. Large cash withdrawals, payments to offshore accounts, and some unusual consulting fees. Victoria studied the papers with the same intensity she had once reserved for merger agreements. The pattern that emerged was disturbing, but not conclusive. These payments to Morrison Security Consulting, she said, pointing to a series of $10,000 transfers. Jake Morrison told me he was contacted anonymously. The payments originated from an account controlled by Sterling Venture Capital, your husband's firm. Victoria's hands stilled on the documents. She had suspected Marcus might be involved, but seeing the proof in black and white felt like a physical blow. There's more, Chen continued. Your husband has been in regular contact with someone named Cassandra Vale. Phone records show daily calls for the past 3 months. Who is Cassandra Vale? Chen handed her a printed profile from social media. Social media influencer focuses on wealth building and manifestation techniques. She has 100,000 followers and a history of romantic involvement with wealthy men. Victoria stared at the photograph of a young, beautiful woman posing in front of luxury cars and designer boutiques. The captions were full of inspirational quotes about deserving abundance and taking bold action to achieve dreams. Are they having an affair? The evidence suggests an intimate relationship. Yes, but there's something else you need to see. Chen opened his laptop and played a video recording. The image was grainy, clearly shot from a distance, but the audio was clear enough to understand every word. Marcus Sterling's voice filled the office. The pregnancy complicates things, but it actually makes the cover story more sympathetic. A grieving widower who lost both wife and child will be above suspicion. Cassandra's laugh was cold and calculating, and then will be free to build something even bigger than what she has now. Victoria's face went pale as the conversation continued, detailing the plot to murder her and inherit Sterling Industries. When the recording ended, she sat in silence for several minutes. How did you get this anonymous tip? Someone wanted you to hear this conversation. Victoria's mind was already working through the implications. Someone else knows about the plot. Someone who recorded this conversation and chose to expose it after the attempt failed. Her phone rang. Marcus's name appeared on the caller ID. Victoria, darling, how are you feeling? His voice was warm with concern, the same voice that had just been discussing her murder on the recording. Better. Thank you. I'm reviewing some business matters from home. You should be resting. The doctor said you need time to recover from the trauma. I'll rest when I know who tried to kill me. There was a pause. Of course. Have the police made any progress? They're following several leads. I should have answers soon. After ending the call, Victoria turned to Chen. I want surveillance on both Marcus and Cassandra Vale. 24 hours a day. And I want to know who recorded that conversation. Mrs. Sterling, this is extremely dangerous. If your husband is willing to commit murder once, he already killed my child, Victoria said quietly. He's not going to get another chance. That evening, Jake Morrison was washing dishes in his apartment when his doorbell rang. Through the peephole, he saw Victoria Sterling standing in the hallway, alone and looking determined. Mrs. Sterling, what are you doing here? We need to talk, Jake, about what really happened Thursday night. Jake hesitated, then opened the door. Victoria entered his modest apartment, her expensive clothes and commanding presence incongruous in the humble surroundings. Your son, Victoria said, noticing the medical equipment in the corner. How is he? The surgery was successful. He's recovering well. I'm glad. No child should suffer because of adult mistakes. Victoria sat on Jake's worn couch and looked directly at him. I know Marcus hired you. I know he paid you $50,000 to stage an incident that was supposed to make you look like a hero. Jake's shoulders sagged with relief and exhaustion. I never intended for you to get hurt. I thought it was just a demonstration, a way to prove you needed better security. But someone modified your plan. Yes, the electromagnetic pulse device I built was designed to disable your car's electronics and create harmless smoke. Someone added incendiary devices that turned it into a real fire. Victoria studied Jake's face, reading the guilt and regret in his expression. Who modified your device? I don't know, but Marcus had access to my apartment. I gave him a key as part of the security arrangement. Jake, I need your help. Marcus is planning something else, and I need evidence that will stand up in court. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Mrs. Sterling, why should I help you? You fired me 6 months ago based on fabricated evidence. You destroyed my career without giving me a chance to defend myself. Because Marcus is using both of us, Victoria said simply. He manipulated you into becoming his weapon, and he tried to murder me for my money. If we don't stop him, he'll destroy anyone who gets in his way. She pulled out a cashier's check and placed it on Jake's coffee table. $100,000, enough to secure your son's future and compensate you for the risks you'll be taking. Jake stared at the check. What do you want me to do? Wear a wire? Get Marcus to confess on tape? Give me evidence I can use to destroy him before he tries again. That's incredibly dangerous. If Marcus suspects I'm working with you, he already thinks you're his accomplice. Use that. Tell him you're worried about the investigation getting too close. Get him to reveal details about the plot. Jake looked at the photograph of Tommy on his refrigerator, then back at Victoria. If I do this, I need guarantees, protection for my son, immunity from prosecution, and your word that this ends when Marcus is arrested. You have all of that. They spent the next hour planning the operation. Jake would contact Marcus and arrange a meeting, claiming he was nervous about police questioning. He would wear recording equipment provided by Victoria's investigator and try to get Marcus to incriminate himself. As Victoria prepared to leave, Jake asked the question that had been bothering him since the hospital. Mrs. Sterling, why didn't you have me arrested? You know I was part of the plot, even if I was manipulated into it. Victoria paused at the door. Because you risked your life to save mine, even after realizing you'd been used. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. And because you need my help to catch your husband. That too, Victoria admitted. But mostly because I believe in second chances. Jake. Marcus never gave you one when he framed you for industrial espionage. I'm giving you one now. After Victoria left, Jake sat alone in his apartment, holding the cashier's check and thinking about the choice ahead of him. He could take the money and disappear, leaving Victoria to fight Marcus on her own. Or he could risk everything to help bring down the man who had manipulated them both. The decision wasn't difficult. Jake Morrison had made many mistakes in his life, but abandoning someone who needed his help wouldn't be another one. He picked up his phone and called Marcus Sterling. We need to meet. The police are asking questions I can't answer. Marcus's response was immediate and eager. Tomorrow night, same warehouse where we first met. And Jake, don't worry, I'll make sure you're protected. But as Jake ended the call, he realized that protection was the last thing Marcus Sterling intended to provide. Tomorrow night's meeting would determine whether justice was served or whether Victoria Sterling joined her unborn child in the grave. The web of lies and manipulation that Marcus had spun so carefully was beginning to unravel, pulled apart by the very people he had tried to destroy. But cornered predators were always most dangerous, and Marcus Sterling still had one more card to play. The warehouse district looked different at night, transformed by shadows and the distant glow of the city into something from a noir film. Jake Morrison arrived 30 minutes early. His truck parked in the same alley where he had waited to destroy Victoria Sterling's life just 1 week ago. Now he was wearing a wire that would hopefully save it. The recording device was sophisticated, provided by Victoria's investigator, and small enough to be undetectable. But Jake's military training reminded him that even the best equipment could fail at the worst possible moment. Marcus Sterling's Tesla pulled up to Warehouse 49 at exactly 9 p.m. He emerged wearing dark clothes instead of his usual business casual, and Jake noticed the way Marcus's eyes scanned the area before approaching the building. This wasn't the confident venture capitalist from their first meeting. This was a man who knew he was being hunted. "Jake, thank you for coming," Marcus said, but his usual charm felt forced. "I understand the police have been persistent with their questions." "Too persistent," Jake replied, following Marcus into the warehouse. "They're asking about technical details I can't explain without implicating myself." "What kind of details?" "The electromagnetic pulse device. They found fragments that show it was modified with incendiary components. They want to know who had access to my apartment." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, but Jake noticed his hands were trembling slightly. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing yet. But they're threatening to arrest me as an accessory if I don't cooperate." They reached the same corner where Marcus had first laid out his plan. This time, there were no folding chairs, and both men remained standing. Jake could feel the tension radiating from Marcus like heat from a fire. "Jake, I need you to understand something," Marcus began. "What happened Thursday night went exactly as planned." "What do you mean you said it was supposed to be a harmless demonstration?" "I lied." Marcus's mask finally slipped completely, revealing the cold calculation underneath. "Victoria was never supposed to survive that fire. You were hired to kill my wife, not save her." Jake felt his blood turn to ice water, but he kept his expression neutral. "You wanted me to murder her? I wanted you to create the perfect accident, an electromagnetic pulse device that would disable her security systems and ignite incendiary charges I had placed throughout the limousine. You would be long gone before the fire started, and the investigation would conclude that mechanical failure caused a tragic accident. But I pulled her out of the car." Marcus's laugh was bitter and cold. "That was your conscience getting in the way of good business? Do you have any idea how much money you cost me by playing hero? How much is a human life worth to you, Marcus?" "Victoria's life was worth $12 billion. That's what I stood to inherit if the plan had worked correctly." Jake's recorder was capturing every word, but he needed more specific details for the evidence to be legally conclusive. "What about the pregnancy? You would have killed your own child." "The pregnancy was an inconvenience. Nothing more. Children can be replaced. $12 billion in assets cannot." "And Cassandra Vale. Where does she fit into this?" Marcus's expression hardened. "Cassandra is a complication that needs to be resolved. She's become greedy and unpredictable." "Resolve her how?" "The same way I'm going to resolve you." "Jake." The threat was delivered casually, but Jake immediately understood that this meeting had been a trap from the beginning. Marcus had never intended to let Jake leave the warehouse alive. "The police investigation is getting too close," Marcus continued, pulling a gun from his jacket. "They'll discover the connection between my financial accounts and the payments to you. When they do, I need you to be the tragic victim of a robbery gone wrong." Jake raised his hand slowly, his mind racing through tactical options. The warehouse was isolated, with limited escape routes and no witnesses. Marcus clearly planned to kill him and arrange the scene to look like a random crime. "You're making a mistake, Marcus. If I disappear, Victoria will know you're responsible. Victoria is a broken woman grieving the loss of her child. In a few months, she'll be grateful for my support and guidance. The board of directors will appreciate my steady leadership during her emotional recovery. She's stronger than you think." "Not anymore. Grief has a way of destroying even the strongest people." Jake tensed, preparing to dive for cover behind a concrete pillar. But before Marcus could pull the trigger, the warehouse filled with the sound of approaching sirens. What the hell? Marcus spun toward the entrance as police cars surrounded the building. SFPD? The building is surrounded. Drop your weapon and come out with your hands visible. Detective Harrison's voice echoed through the warehouse as spotlights flooded the interior. Marcus looked at Jake with sudden understanding. You're wearing a wire. Yes. How long? Long enough to record your confession to attempted murder. Marcus's face twisted with rage as he realized how completely he had been outmaneuvered. You have no idea what you've done. Victoria will never be safe as long as I'm alive. Then I guess it's a good thing you're going to prison for the rest of your life. Marcus raised the gun toward Jake, but police marksmen were already in position. The single gunshot that echoed through the warehouse came from Detective Harrison's weapon, and Marcus Sterling collapsed to the concrete floor, the gun spinning away from his hand. Paramedics rushed to treat Marcus's shoulder wound while officers placed him under arrest. As they read him his rights, Marcus's eyes remained fixed on Jake with undiluted hatred. This isn't over, Marcus said as they loaded him into the ambulance. Cassandra knows everything. She'll finish what I started. Jake nodded to Detective Harrison. You got all of that? Every word, between your recording and the surveillance equipment we had in place. Marcus Sterling is going away for a very long time. 30 minutes later, Jake found Victoria waiting in the parking lot outside the warehouse. She was sitting in the passenger seat of Detective Harrison's unmarked car, her face pale but determined. Thank you, she said as Jake approached. I know that was incredibly dangerous. It needed to be done. Marcus was never going to stop until one of us was dead. Victoria stepped out of the car and faced Jake directly. I have a proposition for you. Another one. This one's legitimate. Sterling Industries needs a new head of security. Someone with your background and skills. The job comes with a salary of $200,000 a year, full medical benefits, and a signing bonus sufficient to secure your son's future. Jake was quiet for a moment. Why? Because you've proven twice now that you're willing to risk everything to do the right thing. That's exactly the kind of person I need protecting my company. What about Cassandra Vale? Victoria's expression hardened. She's next. Marcus was right about one thing. This isn't over as long as she's free. Then I accept your offer, but on one condition. What's that? We finish this together. No more secrets, no more lies, no more manipulation. If we're going after Cassandra, we do it as partners. Victoria extended her hand to Jake. Partners. As they shook hands in the parking lot of the warehouse where Marcus Sterling had planned to commit 2 murders, both Victoria and Jake understood that their fight was far from over. Cassandra Vale was still free, still dangerous, and still in possession of enough information to destroy them both. But they were no longer fighting alone. The hunter had become the hunted, and Marcus Sterling's empire of lies was crumbling around him. Tomorrow, they would begin the hunt for Cassandra Vale. Tonight, they had proven that sometimes the good guys really do win. But Cassandra Vale was about to prove that even victories could be turned into defeats by someone clever enough to see the bigger picture. Cassandra Vale learned about Marcus Sterling's arrest from her phone while recording a morning motivation video in her downtown loft. The news alert popped up during what was supposed to be an inspirational message about embracing unexpected plot twists in your success story. She finished the recording with practiced composure, talking about how setbacks were just setups for comebacks, how the universe tested your commitment before delivering your dreams. Her followers would never know that she was actually talking about the collapse of her plan to inherit $12 billion. After posting the video, Cassandra sat in silence, calculating her options. Marcus was in custody, facing charges of attempted murder and conspiracy. Jake Morrison had obviously turned against them, working with Victoria Sterling to expose the plot. The evidence against her was circumstantial, but mounting. She could run, disappearing into the network of offshore accounts and false identities she had prepared for this possibility. Or she could stay and fight, using the weapons that had always served her best: manipulation, misdirection, and the power of social media to control the narrative. Cassandra chose to fight. Within 2 hours, she had transformed herself from co-conspirator to victim, crafting a story that would redirect all blame onto Marcus Sterling while positioning herself as another one of his victims. Beautiful souls, she began in a tearful video posted to all her social media accounts. I need to share something deeply personal with you. For the past few months, I was manipulated and emotionally abused by a man who claimed to love me, but was actually using me as part of a scheme to hurt his wife. The performance was masterful. Cassandra spoke about falling in love with Marcus Sterling, believing he was separated from his wife, only to discover he was planning to murder Victoria for her money. She claimed she had been threatened into silence, too afraid to go to the police until Marcus's arrest made it safe to speak out. I was young, naive, and blinded by what I thought was love, she continued, tears streaming down her face. Marcus Sterling is a sociopath who preys on vulnerable women. I'm coming forward now because other victims deserve to know they're not alone. The video went viral within hours. Comments poured in from followers offering support and sympathy. The narrative was simple and compelling: a young woman manipulated by an older, powerful man who used her feelings against her. But Victoria Sterling was watching the video from her office at Sterling Industries, and she wasn't buying a word of it. She's good, Jake Morrison said, standing behind Victoria's desk as they watched Cassandra's performance. If I didn't have evidence to the contrary, I'd believe her myself. The audio recording proves she was an active participant in planning my murder, Victoria replied. But she's getting ahead of the story, controlling the narrative before we can expose her. Victoria's phone rang. Detective Harrison sounded tired when she answered. Mrs. Sterling, we have a problem. Cassandra Vale has retained a high-profile attorney and is claiming she was coerced into participating in your husband's plot. She's positioned herself as a victim of domestic manipulation. What about the recording of her discussing my murder? Her lawyer claims it was taken out of context, that she was going along with Marcus's fantasies out of fear for her own safety. Without additional evidence, the district attorney isn't confident about securing a conviction. Victoria closed her eyes, feeling the frustration build in her chest. So, she's going to walk free? Not necessarily, but we need more evidence. Something that proves she was an active participant, rather than a coerced victim. After ending the call, Victoria turned to Jake. She's going to get away with it. Maybe not. Cassandra's greatest strength is also her weakness. What do you mean? She can't resist being the center of attention. Look at this video. She could have disappeared, but instead she chose to make herself the story. That need for validation will be her downfall. Victoria studied the freeze frame of Cassandra's tearful face on her computer screen. What are you thinking? We give her what she wants. More attention, more spotlight, more opportunity to be the victim. But we do it in a way that forces her to reveal information only the real conspirator would know. Over the next hour, they crafted a plan that would use Cassandra's narcissism against her. Victoria would grant an exclusive interview to the city's most prominent investigative journalist, revealing new details about the assassination attempt and challenging Cassandra's version of events. The interview aired that evening on the 6 o'clock news. Victoria appeared composed and credible as she discussed the attempt on her life, the loss of her unborn child, and her determination to see justice served. Cassandra Vale claims she was manipulated into participating in this plot, Victoria told the journalist. But the evidence suggests she was an active conspirator who helped plan my murder for financial gain. What evidence? audio recordings of conversations where she discussed the specifics of the plot, including details about my schedule and security arrangements that only someone with inside knowledge could have possessed. The interview was calculated to provoke a response, and Cassandra took the bait immediately. Within an hour of the broadcast, she posted a video response that was emotional, detailed, and ultimately self-incriminating. Victoria Sterling is trying to destroy me because I'm the one person who can expose the truth about her marriage, Cassandra declared. She wants people to believe I was involved in planning her attack, but I was actually trying to protect her. Then Cassandra made the mistake that would destroy her case. I tried to warn her about Marcus's plan. I sent anonymous messages to her security team about potential threats. I even considered calling the police, but Marcus threatened to kill me if I interfered. Jake paused the video and looked at Victoria. Did you receive any anonymous warnings? No, and there's no record of any messages to our security team. So she just lied about something that can be easily verified. Victoria was already calling Detective Harrison. Ray, I need you to check something. Cassandra Vale claims she sent anonymous warnings to my security team about potential threats. Can you verify whether any such communications exist? I'll check immediately. 20 minutes later, Detective Harrison called back. No anonymous warnings. No messages to your security team. No evidence that anyone tried to warn you about the plot. So she just committed perjury on social media and contradicted her earlier statement that she was too afraid to contact anyone. We can use this. The next morning, Cassandra Vale was arrested at her downtown loft while recording another video about overcoming adversity through positive thinking. The irony was lost on no one. Her arrest was broadcast live on local news, complete with footage of officers leading her away in handcuffs while her ring light setup continued filming an empty chair. At her arraignment, Cassandra's attorney tried to maintain the coercion defense, but the prosecution had new evidence, her social media posts contradicting her earlier statements. Financial records showing payments from Marcus Sterling's accounts, and, most damaging of all, a second audio recording that Victoria's investigator had been holding in reserve. This recording captured Cassandra discussing specific details of the limousine's route and timing. Information that proved she had been an active participant in planning the attack rather than a coerced victim. The judge denied bail, citing Cassandra as a flight risk and a danger to the community. As Victoria and Jake left the courthouse, reporters surrounded them with questions about the arrest and the investigation. Mrs. Sterling, how do you feel about seeing both conspirators arrested? Victoria paused on the courthouse steps, choosing her words carefully. I feel grateful that justice is being served, but mostly, I feel sad that so much pain and loss came from simple greed. What's next for Sterling Industries? We're moving forward. The company is strong. Our mission remains the same, and we're committed to building technology that makes the world better. As they walked to their car, Jake asked the question that had been bothering him since Cassandra's arrest. Do you think this is really over? Victoria considered the question as they drove away from the courthouse. The immediate threat is over. Marcus and Cassandra are both in custody, facing charges that will keep them locked up for decades. But the real damage was never about money or corporate control. They murdered my child, Jake. That's something I'll never get back, never fully recover from. I'm sorry. I know my role in that. You were manipulated into participating in something you thought was harmless. They planned to commit murder. There's a difference. They drove in silence for several minutes before Victoria spoke again. I've been thinking about what you said about second chances. Everyone deserves them, but not everyone accepts them. What do you mean? Marcus and Cassandra had every opportunity to choose different paths. Marcus could have been content with his own success instead of coveting mine. Cassandra could have built her own empire instead of trying to steal someone else's. And you're giving me a second chance? We're giving each other second chances. I failed you when I fired you based on fabricated evidence. You helped save my life when you could have walked away. As they pulled into the Sterling Industries parking garage, Victoria realized that justice and healing weren't the same thing. Marcus and Cassandra would go to prison, but Victoria would spend the rest of her life grieving the child they had killed. Still, there was something to be said for survival, for the possibility of building something better from the ashes of what had been destroyed. Jake Morrison had lost his first career to false accusations, but found a new purpose in protecting others. Victoria had lost her husband and child to betrayal, but discovered she was stronger than she had ever imagined. Sometimes second chances weren't about getting back what you had lost. Sometimes they were about building something entirely new from the pieces that remained. The influencer's last stand had failed, but the real story was just beginning. 6 months after the arrests, Victoria Sterling stood in her office looking out at the San Francisco Bay, where container ships moved slowly toward the horizon like pieces on a vast chessboard. Sterling Industries had not only survived the scandal, but had grown stronger, its stock price reaching record highs as investors responded to Victoria's leadership during crisis. Jake Morrison knocked on her office door, carrying a security briefing and wearing the kind of confident expression that came from meaningful work. "Morning report," he said, placing the folder on her desk. "All clear on external threats, and the new security protocols are working perfectly. Any word from the district attorney about trial dates?" Marcus Sterling's trial is scheduled for September. Cassandra Vale's attorney is still trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecution isn't interested in anything less than 25 years. Victoria nodded, but Jake noticed she seemed distracted. "Something wrong?" "Doctor, Mitchell called this morning. She wanted to discuss some test results." Jake's expression immediately became concerned. Victoria had been having regular medical checkups since the attack, monitoring for any long-term effects from the smoke inhalation and trauma. "Is everything okay?" Victoria turned from the window, and Jake was surprised to see tears in her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. "I'm pregnant." Jake stared at her for a moment, processing the news. That's incredible. How do you feel about it?" "Terrified," Victoria admitted, "but also hopeful. After everything that happened, I didn't think I'd ever want to try again." "How far along?" 8 weeks. Still early. But Dr. Mitchell says everything looks normal." Jake smiled, the first genuinely happy expression Victoria had seen from him since they'd started working together. "Congratulations. This is wonderful news." "I hope so. I'm not sure I can handle losing another child." "You won't," Jake said firmly. "We have the best security in the city, the best medical care, and you're surrounded by people who care about you." Victoria sat behind her desk, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach. "Jake, I need to ask you something personal. You know, what? Are you happy working here? I mean, after everything that happened, after all the complications and danger, is this the life you want?" Jake considered the question carefully. 6 months ago, I was unemployed, bitter, and watching my son slowly die from a condition I couldn't afford to treat. Today, Tommy is completely healthy. I have meaningful work protecting people who matter, and I wake up every morning knowing I'm making a difference. That's not what I asked. Yes, I'm happy. Happier than I've been since my wife died. Victoria smiled, the first completely relaxed expression Jake had seen from her in months. "Good, because I'm going to need someone I trust completely to help me through the next several months." "You have that." Their conversation was interrupted by Victoria's assistant, announcing that Senator Patricia Wells was on the phone. "Patricia," Victoria said, answering on speaker. "How are you?" "Concerned." Senator Wells replied. "I've been hearing rumors about additional threats against you. Something about revenge attacks by supporters of Marcus Sterling." Victoria and Jake exchanged glances. They had been monitoring online chatter from various extremist groups who viewed Marcus as a victim of feminist persecution, but the threats hadn't been credible enough to warrant serious concern. "We're aware of the online activity," Victoria said, "but our security assessment suggests it's mostly noise from keyboard warriors who won't take any real action." "I hope you're right. But Victoria, I want you to consider something. You've been through enormous trauma, you're pregnant again, and you're running a major corporation while dealing with ongoing legal proceedings. Have you thought about taking some time away from the public eye?" "You mean hide? I mean protect yourself and your child by reducing your exposure until the trials are over and the immediate danger has passed." Victoria looked at Jake, who nodded slightly. The suggestion wasn't unreasonable. "I appreciate your concern, Patricia, but I'm not going to let fear control my life. Sterling Industries needs steady leadership, and I'm not going to abandon my responsibilities." "Then at least consider relocating to a more secure facility during the pregnancy. Somewhere private, away from the city, where you can focus on your health and safety." After ending the call, Victoria turned to Jake. "What do you think?" "I think Senator Wells has a point. The threats may not be credible now, but that could change, and pregnancy adds complications to personal security that we should take seriously." "You're recommending I go into hiding?" "I'm recommending we consider all options. There's a difference between hiding and being strategically cautious." Victoria stood and walked to her window again, watching the city that had been her home and battleground for the past several years. "I built this company from nothing," she said quietly. "I survived an assassination attempt, exposed the conspiracy, and brought the perpetrators to justice. I'm not going to spend the next 7 months hiding in a bunker because some internet trolls don't like strong women. Then we adapt. Enhanced security, modified routines, additional precautions. But you're right. Hiding isn't the answer." That afternoon, Victoria held a press conference to announce Sterling Industries' new charitable foundation, focused on supporting victims of domestic violence and workplace harassment. The timing was deliberate. She wanted to demonstrate that she wasn't retreating from public life, despite the ongoing threats. Violence and intimidation have always been the tools of people who can't compete on merit. Victoria told the assembled reporters, "Sterling Industries will continue to grow, innovate, and lead, regardless of attempts to silence or intimidate us." The questions from reporters were respectful but probing. "Mrs. Sterling, there are rumors about additional threats against you. Are you concerned for your safety?" "I take all security matters seriously, but I refuse to live in fear. The people who tried to harm me are in prison, and justice is being served." "What about the online harassment from supporters of your husband?" "Harassment is the last resort of people who have no legitimate arguments. I'm more concerned with building the future than dwelling on the failures of the past." After the press conference, Victoria and Jake returned to her office to review the security arrangements for the coming weeks. The enhanced protocols included additional bodyguards, armored vehicles, and restricted access to Victoria's residence and office. "One more thing," Jake said as they finished the briefing. "I want to discuss personal protection during your pregnancy." "What do you mean? Bulletproof vests, for example?" "Standard body armor isn't designed for pregnant women, but there are specialized options that can provide protection without risking harm to the baby." Victoria hadn't considered the technical challenges of protecting herself and her unborn child simultaneously. "How do you know about specialized armor for pregnant women?" "Research. I've been studying every aspect of protection protocols since you hired me. Your safety is my responsibility, and that includes adapting to changing circumstances." "Thank you. I don't think I fully appreciated how complicated this would become." "Victoria, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Why are you doing this?" "You could sell Sterling Industries tomorrow, take your billions, and disappear to a private island somewhere? Why stay and fight? Victoria was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. Because running away would mean Marcus won. He tried to destroy me, and if I abandon everything I built, then he succeeded, even though he's in prison. That's one reason. What's the other one? How do you know there's another reason? Because I know you? You don't make decisions based on spite or ego. There's always a deeper motivation. Victoria smiled at his perceptiveness. The other reason is that I want my child to inherit a world where women don't have to choose between success and safety. Where powerful people can't destroy others just because they feel entitled to what they have. That's a big responsibility for one person. It's not just one person anymore. It's all of us who refuse to accept that might makes right. Their conversation was interrupted by an emergency alert on Jake's phone. He read the message quickly, his expression becoming grim. What is it? Security breach at the downtown office? Someone tried to access the executive floor using forged credentials. Catch them. No. But they left something behind. 20 minutes later, they stood in Victoria's downtown office while police and security teams processed the scene. On Victoria's desk was a single photograph, an ultrasound image from her medical file, with a red X drawn across it. Detective Harrison examined the photograph with latex gloves. How did someone get access to your medical records? I don't know. Dr. Mitchell's office has strict privacy protocols. We'll investigate the source, but the immediate concern is the message. Someone is threatening your pregnancy specifically. Victoria stared at the defaced ultrasound image, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the office air conditioning. The photograph was a precise psychological attack, designed to terrorize her in the most personal way possible. This changes things, Jake said quietly. We're not dealing with random internet threats anymore. Someone with resources and connections is actively targeting you. Or someone with access to people who have those resources, Detective Harrison added. Mrs. Sterling, I'm recommending immediate relocation to a secure facility. This threat is too specific and too personal to ignore. Victoria wanted to argue, to insist on maintaining her normal routine despite the escalating danger. But looking at the crossed-out image of her unborn child, she realized that stubbornness could become a form of recklessness that endangered more than just herself. What kind of secure facility? There's a private estate in Marin County that we use for witness protection in high-profile cases. Complete privacy, advanced security systems, medical facilities on site. You could continue running Sterling Industries remotely while ensuring the safety of your pregnancy. Victoria looked at Jake, who nodded encouragingly. It's the right choice. We can maintain all your business operations from a secure location. How long? Until after the trials, at minimum. Possibly until after the baby is born, depending on the ongoing threat assessment. Victoria touched her stomach, feeling the weight of responsibility for the life growing inside her. 6 months ago, she had been focused on building a business empire. Now she was focused on simple survival. All right, but I want to make one thing clear. This is a tactical retreat, not a surrender. Sterling Industries continues operating. We continue fighting for justice, and we continue building the future we want to see. Understood? Detective Harrison said. We'll begin arrangements for the relocation immediately. As they prepared to leave the contaminated office, Victoria took one last look at the photograph on her desk. Someone had violated her privacy, threatened her child, and forced her into hiding. But they had also made a critical error. They had revealed that she was important enough to them to risk exposure through direct action. Jake, she said as they walked to the elevator, I want you to do something for me. What? Find out who did this? Not just who broke into the office, but who gave them the information and the motivation. Someone is coordinating these attacks, And I want to know who. That could be dangerous. If we're dealing with someone sophisticated enough to access medical records and coordinate physical threats, then we need to be more sophisticated than they are. As the elevator doors closed, Victoria Sterling was already planning her next move. The golden cage had been replaced by a different kind of prison, but she was still alive, still fighting, and still determined to protect the future she was carrying within her. The reconstruction of her life was far from complete, but the foundation was solid. She had allies she could trust, resources to fight back, and a reason to keep fighting that was more important than any business empire. Sometimes survival wasn't about winning every battle. Sometimes it was about choosing which battles were worth fighting and which enemies were worth defeating. The war for Victoria Sterling's life was entering a new phase, but she was no longer fighting alone. The Marin County estate sat on 200 acres of rolling hills, surrounded by oak trees and protected by security systems that would have impressed the Pentagon. Victoria Sterling had been living there for 3 weeks, conducting Sterling Industries business from a converted library that now served as her command center. The transition had been more difficult than she had anticipated. Video conferences replaced board meetings, encrypted communications substituted for face-to-face negotiations, and the isolation was beginning to wear on her despite the justified security concerns. Jake Morrison had moved into the estate's guest house, along with a rotating team of security specialists who maintained 24-hour surveillance of the property. Dr. Sarah Mitchell made weekly visits to monitor Victoria's pregnancy, which was progressing normally despite the stress of the ongoing threats. Any progress on identifying the source of the medical records breach? Victoria asked during their morning security briefing. Some, Jake replied, consulting his tablet. Detective Harrison traced the ultrasound photograph to a copy made at a third-party imaging facility. Someone hacked their database and accessed files for several high-profile patients. So it wasn't specifically targeting me. Not initially, but someone was fishing for compromising information about wealthy individuals, and your pregnancy made you a particularly attractive target. Victoria stood and walked to the library windows, which offered a view of the hills and valleys that stretched toward San Francisco Bay. The beauty of the landscape was undeniable, but she felt like a prisoner in a luxury resort. Victoria, Jake said gently, I know this is difficult, but the threat level remains high. Marcus Sterling's trial starts next week, and that could trigger additional attempts by his supporters. Have you seen the latest social media posts? Jake grimaced. Unfortunately, yes. The online harassment had escalated since Victoria's relocation became public knowledge. Conspiracy theorists claimed she was faking the threats to gain sympathy. Men's rights activists portrayed Marcus as a victim of false accusations. Anti-feminist groups used Victoria's situation to argue that successful women inevitably destroy the men around them. They're calling me everything from a murderer to a manipulator to a gold digger who framed her own husband, Victoria said bitterly. The irony would be amusing if it weren't so vicious. The internet amplifies the worst voices, Jake replied. Most people understand what really happened. Do they? Or do they just want to believe that powerful women must have done something to deserve what happens to them? Before Jake could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgent message. He read it quickly, his expression becoming serious. What is it? Detective Harrison wants to video conference immediately. Something about new evidence in Cassandra Vale's case. They set up the secure video link in Victoria's command center. Detective Harrison appeared on screen, looking tired but determined. Mrs. Sterling, we've had a significant development. Cassandra Vale's attorney approached the district attorney this morning with new information. What kind of information? She claims to have evidence that Marcus Sterling was planning additional murders beyond the attempt on your life. Victoria felt her blood turn cold. Who else was he planning to kill? According to Cassandra, Marcus had a list of people he considered threats to his plan. Senator Patricia Wells was at the top of that list. Jake leaned forward. Senator Wells, why would Marcus target her? Because she was investigating his financial dealings and had discovered evidence of money laundering through his venture capital firm. Marcus knew she would eventually expose him. Victoria's mind raced through the implications. Patricia has been one of my strongest supporters on the board of directors. If Marcus eliminated her, he would have removed a major obstacle to taking control of Sterling Industries. Detective Harrison finished. Cassandra claims she has documentation proving Marcus was planning to stage Senator Wells's death as a car accident. Why is Cassandra revealing this now? Her attorney says she's finally ready to cooperate fully in exchange for a reduced sentence. But there's a catch. Victoria had learned to distrust any development that seemed too convenient. What's the catch? She'll only provide the evidence in person during a face-to-face meeting with you? Absolutely not, Jake said immediately. That's obviously a trap. Maybe, Detective Harrison agreed. But the evidence she's offering could expose a conspiracy much larger than we originally understood. If Marcus was planning multiple murders, then other people are still in danger. Victoria finished. Where does she want to meet? The federal courthouse in San Francisco. Maximum security. Controlled environment. Multiple law enforcement agencies present. Victoria was quiet for several minutes, weighing the risks against the potential benefits. If Cassandra really had evidence of additional planned murders, Victoria had a moral obligation to help expose them. But meeting with someone who had already tried to kill her once seemed like an unnecessary risk. What does your instinct tell you? She asked Jake. That we're being manipulated again? Cassandra is desperate, facing decades in prison, and she'll say anything to improve her situation. But if she's telling the truth, then we find another way to get the evidence. You don't have to put yourself in danger to do the right thing. Victoria made her decision. Set up the meeting, but I want security arrangements that would protect the president, and I want backup plans for every possible scenario. Victoria, this is a mistake, Jake said firmly. Maybe, but I can't spend the rest of my pregnancy hiding while other people are in danger because of something my husband planned. Detective Harrison nodded. I'll coordinate with federal marshals and courthouse security. The meeting will be scheduled for next Tuesday morning. After ending the video call, Victoria and Jake spent the afternoon reviewing security protocols for the courthouse meeting. The arrangements were extensive armored vehicle transport, advanced security sweeps, multiple escape routes, and enough law enforcement personnel to handle any conceivable threat. I still think this is a bad idea, Jake said as they finished the planning session. Noted. But Jake, I need to ask you something, and I want a completely honest answer. Always. Do you think I'm making this decision rationally? Or am I being driven by guilt and anger over what Marcus did? Jake considered the question carefully. I think you're being driven by the same sense of responsibility that built Sterling Industries. You see a problem that you might be able to solve, and you can't walk away from it. That's not what I asked. You're being rational about an irrational situation. Cassandra might be lying, but if she's not, then Senator Wells and possibly other people are in danger. The security arrangements will minimize the risk to you while maximizing the potential benefit. And if it's a trap, then we'll deal with it. That's why you hired me. That evening, Victoria called Senator Patricia Wells to inform her about the planned meeting and the potential threat against her life. Patricia, I need to tell you something that might be difficult to hear. What is it, Victoria? According to new evidence, Marcus was planning to have you killed as part of his scheme to take control of Sterling Industries. The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds before Senator Wells responded. I'm not entirely surprised, she said finally. I've been investigating some irregularities in his financial dealings. Money laundering, offshore accounts, connections to some very unsavory characters. Why didn't you tell me? I wanted to be certain before making accusations. But Victoria, if Marcus was planning to kill me, then this conspiracy goes much deeper than personal greed. What do you mean? Marcus was connected to a network of venture capitalists who specialize in hostile takeovers of female-owned businesses. They use intimidation, harassment, and apparently murder to force women out of leadership positions. The revelation hit Victoria like a physical blow. You're saying this wasn't just about my money? I'm saying Marcus may have been part of a systematic effort to eliminate successful women from positions of power. Your company was just one target among many. As Victoria absorbed this information, she realized that the meeting with Cassandra Vale had become even more important. If there really was a network of men targeting successful women, then exposing them was worth almost any risk. But first, she had to survive long enough to do it. The courthouse meeting was scheduled for Tuesday morning, and Victoria Sterling was about to walk into what might be either the key to justice or the final trap in a game that had already cost her so much. Either way, she was done hiding. Tuesday morning arrived gray and cold, with fog rolling off San Francisco Bay, like a harbinger of uncertainty. Victoria Sterling sat in the back of an armored SUV, watching the city wake up as they drove toward the federal courthouse. She was 5 months pregnant now, her condition visible despite the bulletproof vest she wore beneath her business suit. Jake Morrison rode in the passenger seat, communicating with the security teams through an encrypted radio system. 3 additional vehicles flanked their convoy, and federal marshals had secured every possible route to the courthouse. Last chance to change your mind, Jake said as they pulled into the courthouse complex. I'm not changing my mind. The security arrangements were overwhelming. Metal detectors, bomb-sniffing dogs, sharpshooters on nearby rooftops, and enough federal agents to secure a small country. Detective Harrison met them at the security checkpoint, looking as nervous as Victoria felt. Cassandra's attorney arrived an hour ago. He briefed them as they walked through the corridors. She's already been searched and is waiting in conference room C with 2 federal marshals. Any indication this is anything other than what it appears to be? None, but we're treating it as a potential threat anyway. Conference room C was sterile and windowless, designed for high-security meetings between law enforcement and dangerous individuals. Cassandra Vale sat at a metal table, wearing an orange jumpsuit and looking far different from the glamorous influencer who had once commanded 100,000 followers. Prison had aged her. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by institutional clothing. Her perfect makeup was absent, revealing the sharp angles of ambition beneath the beauty, but her eyes remained calculating, suggesting that confinement hadn't broken her spirit. Victoria, Cassandra said as they entered the room. Thank you for coming. Let's skip the pleasantries. Detective Harrison says you have evidence about additional murders Marcus was planning. Cassandra smiled, and the expression was genuinely warm for the first time Victoria had ever seen. Always direct? I actually admired that about you, even when I was plotting to kill you. The evidence, Cassandra. Right to business. Very well. Cassandra reached into a manila envelope provided by her attorney and withdrew a stack of documents. Marcus wasn't just planning to kill you and Senator Wells. He had a list of 12 women who he considered obstacles to his network's operations. Victoria took the documents and began reading. What she saw made her blood run cold. The papers detailed a systematic campaign to eliminate successful women through staged accidents, manufactured scandals, and, when necessary, murder. Victoria's name was at the top of the list, but it was followed by recognizable names from business, politics, and media. This is a conspiracy involving dozens of people, Victoria said, looking up from the papers. Venture capitalists, private security firms, corrupt officials, and hired killers. Cassandra confirmed. Marcus was just one operative in a much larger organization. Jake read over Victoria's shoulder, his expression becoming grimmer with each page. How do we know this is legitimate? Because I have recordings, Cassandra replied. Hours of conversations between Marcus and his handlers, detailing plans for multiple assassinations. She handed them a USB drive. Everything is on there. Names, dates, financial transfers, operational details. Enough evidence to bring down the entire network. Detective Harrison examined the USB drive. Why are you giving us this now? Because I finally understood that I was never going to be Marcus's partner. I was just another tool to be discarded when I became inconvenient. Cassandra's voice carried genuine pain beneath the calculation. He was planning to have me killed after your murder, Victoria. I would have been the unstable mistress who committed suicide out of guilt. Victoria felt a chill of recognition. So you were a victim too. We all were. Every woman on that list. Every person who trusted Marcus. Everyone who believed his lies about love and partnership. Cassandra leaned forward. But I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for the chance to help destroy the people who used us. The room fell silent as the magnitude of the conspiracy became clear. This wasn't about one woman's murder or one man's greed. This was about a coordinated effort to eliminate successful women from position of power, using violence and intimidation to preserve a system that benefited predatory men. What do you want in exchange for this evidence? Victoria asked. Witness protection and a reduced sentence. 20 years instead of life without parole. That's a significant reduction for someone who planned murder. It's also the only way you'll get the evidence needed to stop dozens of future murders. Victoria looked at Detective Harrison, who nodded slightly. The deal would have to be approved by the district attorney and federal prosecutors. But the evidence Cassandra was offering could be worth the concession. I'll make the recommendation, Detective Harrison said. But I need to verify the authenticity of these recordings first. Of course. But Victoria, there's something else you need to know. What? Senator Wells isn't safe. According to the timeline I saw, her elimination was scheduled for this week. Victoria's phone immediately rang. Senator Wells's name appeared on the caller ID. Patricia. Victoria, thank God you answered. I'm at the airport, about to board a flight to Washington. Someone just called in a bomb threat against my plane. Don't get on that plane, Victoria said urgently. Get somewhere public and safe, and call federal security immediately. What's happening? I'll explain later. Just please, don't travel anywhere until I call you back. Victoria ended the call and looked at Cassandra. If Senator Wells had gotten on that plane, it would have exploded somewhere over Nevada. Mechanical failure due to poor maintenance. Very tragic. No survivors? The casual way Cassandra described the planned murder was chilling, but it also confirmed that her information was accurate and current. Detective, Victoria said, we need to get this evidence to federal prosecutors immediately, and we need protective custody for everyone on that list. Agreed. This is now a federal investigation involving multiple jurisdictions. As they prepared to leave the conference room, Cassandra spoke one final time. Victoria, I know you have no reason to trust me or forgive me, but I want you to know that watching you survive everything Marcus threw at you convinced me that some people are worth fighting for. Victoria paused at the door. And some people are worth fighting against? Yes. I hope your baby grows up in a world where women don't have to choose between success and survival. That's what I'm fighting for. 6 hours later, Victoria sat in the FBI field office in San Francisco, watching federal agents coordinate arrests across multiple states. The evidence from Cassandra's USB drive had triggered the largest investigation into organized crime against women in American history. Marcus Sterling's network included venture capitalists in New York, tech executives in Silicon Valley, politicians in Washington, and hired killers operating internationally. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering, involving billions of dollars and dozens of victims over nearly a decade. 47 arrests so far. Agent Sarah Chen briefed Victoria and Jake. We expect that number to double by tomorrow as we follow the financial trails and communication networks. What about Senator Wells? Safe in federal protective custody. We intercepted the bomb that was intended for her plane. The device was sophisticated. Definitely the work of professionals. Victoria felt a wave of relief mixed with exhaustion. The fight that had begun with her burning limousine was finally ending, but the cost had been enormous. Mrs. Sterling, Agent Chen continued, we're going to need your testimony for multiple trials. This investigation will likely take years to fully resolve. I understand. Whatever it takes to make sure this never happens again. Jake drove Victoria back to the Marin County estate as the sun set over the Pacific Ocean. The property felt different now, less like a prison and more like a sanctuary where she could rest and recover from the battle she had been fighting for months. How do you feel? Jake asked as they walked into the house. Tired, relieved, angry that it took so long to uncover the truth. Victoria sat on the couch and placed her hands on her growing belly. But also hopeful. Maybe my daughter will grow up in a world where being successful doesn't make you a target. Daughter. Victoria smiled. Dr. Mitchell confirmed it yesterday. I'm having a girl. Jake sat beside her, his expression thoughtful. She's going to grow up hearing stories about how her mother took down a criminal conspiracy while pregnant. I hope that's not the only story she hears about me. What other stories do you want her to hear? Victoria considered the question. That I built something meaningful, that I helped people, that I never gave up, even when everything seemed hopeless. Those are good stories. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness settled over the estate. In the distance, the lights of San Francisco twinkled like stars, reminding Victoria of the night she had announced Sterling Industries' IPO, when she had believed her life was perfect and complete. She had been wrong about perfection, but not about completeness. Her life was full in ways she had never imagined, with purpose, with meaningful relationships, with the promise of new life growing within her. Marcus Sterling and his network had tried to destroy her, but they had failed in the most fundamental way possible. They had made her stronger, more determined, and more committed to building a world where other women wouldn't have to fight the same battles. The golden cage was gone, replaced by something far more valuable, the freedom that came from surviving the worst that people could do and choosing to build something better from the wreckage. Victoria Sterling was no longer just a successful CEO. She was a survivor, a mother-to-be, and a woman who had proven that sometimes the good guys really do win. But the real victory wasn't in the arrests or the justice or the money. The real victory was in the choice to keep fighting, to keep building, to keep believing that the future could be better than the past. Her daughter would inherit that choice, and Victoria intended to make sure she was strong enough to make it. The burning limousine had been just the beginning of the story. The real story was what came after the choice to rise from the ashes and build something better, something stronger, something that couldn't be destroyed by greed or hatred or fear. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes that was everything. Epilogue. 3 years later, Victoria Sterling stood on the stage of the Forbes Women's Summit, holding her 2-year-old daughter, Emma, while addressing an audience of female entrepreneurs and executives. Sterling Industries had become one of the most successful and ethical companies in America, known not just for innovation, but for its commitment to workplace safety and gender equality. Jake Morrison watched from the wings, now Victoria's husband and head of corporate security, wearing the quiet pride of someone who had found his purpose in protecting the people he loved. 3 years ago, Victoria told the audience, someone tried to kill me because they believed my success threatened their power. They were right to be afraid, but not for the reasons they thought. The audience laughed, but Victoria's expression remained serious. They were afraid because successful women proved that the old systems don't work anymore. That merit matters more than connections. That ethics matter more than profit. That building something meaningful matters more than destroying what others have built. She paused, looking down at Emma, who was playing with the microphone cord. My daughter will grow up in a world where being successful doesn't make you a target, where being powerful doesn't make you a victim, where having everything doesn't mean you have to choose between love and achievement. The applause was thunderous, but Victoria wasn't finished. But she'll also grow up knowing that freedom and safety aren't gifts. They're choices we make every day, in every interaction, in every decision about how we treat each other and what kind of world we want to build. As Victoria left the stage, Emma babbling happily in her arms, she thought about the woman she had been 3 years ago, successful but lonely, powerful but vulnerable, complete but somehow empty. That woman had died in the flames of a burning limousine. The woman who emerged from those ashes was something different. A mother, a wife, a leader who understood that true strength came not from what you could build for yourself, but from what you could build for others. The golden cage had been destroyed, but what replaced it was infinitely more valuable: a life lived with purpose, surrounded by people worth fighting for, building a future worth believing in. Sometimes the best revenge was simply refusing to be destroyed. Sometimes the greatest victory was choosing to love instead of hate, to build instead of tear down, to hope instead of despair. Victoria Sterling had learned that lesson in fire and blood and loss, but she had learned it completely. And now she was teaching it to her daughter, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one story at a time. The burning limousine was over. The real story was just beginning. If you're hooked already, smash that like button and let me know in the comments what you think happened next. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because trust me, you won't want to miss how this incredible story unfolds. Share this with someone who loves a good thriller. They'll thank you later.